The first sound was not a weapon but a voice, high and raw with fear, cutting through the crackle of brush and the hiss of wind off the red ravine. It carried in the thin air the way grief carries in a church. "Don't take her, she's just 3!" Cassian Holt stopped mid-step on the dry path and went down into a crouch without thinking. He had learned to respect sudden cries on border worlds. Sometimes they were bait. Sometimes they were a trap set with a child's voice and a rifle behind a rock. But nothing in the cry that reached him now sounded practiced. It was too broken, too desperate. As if each word was dragged over sharp stone. He slid forward until the scrub fell away and the ravine opened below. Against a long slab of ochre, the sort of stone that took heat all day and gave it back in the cool. He saw a ragged caravan halted at a hairpin bend where the old trade track narrowed. 3 cargo skiffs hovered a meter above the dust with their engines throbbing a dull, menacing hum. Men and women in gray armor jackets were dismounting and fanning out. They wore the blank, efficient movements of people doing a job they had done too many times. At the front of the caravan stood the source of the cry, a small alien girl with a narrow face and pale, sea-glass eyes, half lifting her own arms as if she could make herself a shield. Between her and the armored raiders, another child clung to a woman's skirts, sobbing against the fabric. The little one had the same translucent eyes, the same pressed petal ears, but she was younger, her dark hair tangled with dust and a single white feather. "Don't take her!" the older girl cried again, hoarse now. "Please, please, she's only 3. The raiders' leader, tall, unremarkable, the sort of person who hid inside normal shapes, raised a hand, and the caravan guards backed away with their palms up. Their weapons were slung. They knew better than to start a fight they could not win. The leader gave the girl's plea the thin smile of a man checking a price against a ledger and said something Cassian could not hear. Cassian unshouldered his pack and reached for the rifle he had carried since he left Earth service. He laid it aside. A long gun would only announce him. The closer you were to the people you were trying to protect, the more your choices narrowed and hardened. He checked the charges in his second pistol, breathed until his heartbeat slid into a steady drum, and scanned for angles and cover. The ravine wall was stepped with ledges where earlier floods had eaten shelves into the rock. The skiffs were parked side to side, blocking most of the open ground. If he came in from the left, he could ride the shadow of a boulder pile down to the flat, and a hand touched his sleeve. He didn't start, and that was its own victory. On Verge worlds, you only earned surprise once. "Don't go," a whisper said in accented trade. "They shoot you." He turned his head. A woman had come up the path behind him with the soundless footwork of someone taught to travel in silence. She had the same translucent eyes as the girl's, but her skin held a deep river rock tone, and faint lines ran along her cheekbones like a feather's barbs. She wore a healer's satchel crossbody and a crescent blade sheathed low on her hip. There was dried blood on the blade's guard. Her breath came shallow from running. "They'll shoot anyone," Cassian murmured, "but I'm less fond of watching. You are human." She made it almost a question, almost a judgment. Yes, the faintest twitch of her mouth. "Humans are trouble on our best days," he said. "Do you know them?" "They are mine," she said at once, and the quiet in her voice made his scalp tighten. "My clan, those are my daughters." He looked down again. The older one who pleaded had set her feet the way children do when they are determined to stand, and a wind still stronger than they are keeps trying to blow them down. The little one, the 3-year-old, had both hands twisted in her mother's long skirts, as if fabric were a wall. "What do they want?" he asked, though he could guess. "Labor," she said. "Bodies. To sell to the pits or the algae farms or the houses where men with soft hands buy voices to break." Her throat moved once, swallowing. "They take the little ones. They say they train better." Cassian tasted metal. He breathed it down and made his voice flat so it could carry more weight. "Names? The raiders?" Her eyes flicked to the skiffs. "Kestrel." The word had shape in it, and age. Not a mere gang, something with a payroll and a logo burned into the corner of receipts. They work for whoever pays. Sometimes the mines, sometimes off-world buyers. You're their mother, Cassian said gently. Why weren't you with them? I was, she said, and shame flashed and was gone. Not at leaving, but at having to explain. I led the rear. When the skiff struck, we tried to scatter. They netted me with a stun filament and kicked me off the track. I fell into a slit. By the time I climbed out, my breath was gone, and my legs were not my legs. You found me on the way up. And your name? He asked. Because names made people real, made them harder to lose. Narave. Cassian Holt, he said. Do you trust me, Narave? No, she said without malice. But the sky is bright and the air is thin, and my daughters are below, and I will take any rope the day throws me. That will do, he said. They moved together down the stepped stone, using the folds of the ravine to hide their approach. Cassian did the counting he always did. 6 raiders visible, 1 at the skiffs, 3 handling the caravanners, 2 hanging back to watch the high ridges. There would be 1 more a shooter somewhere upslope with a long gun and a clean line of sight. He looked for the flicker that a scope makes when it catches a sun needle, and found it, a glint above a twisted cedar. He filed the angle and moved on. They slid into the shadow of the boulders. Heat came off the stone in slow, dry breaths, smelling of rust and sage. Cassian showed Nara 2 fingers, then 3, then pointed. She pressed her lips into a line and drew in air as if she could drink courage with it. On the flat, the leader of the raiders tipped the older girl's chin with a gloved finger. It was not a tender gesture. It was a habitude of ownership, a test of compliance. He said something again. The girl flinched but did not lower her eyes. The little one cried into the woman's skirt, then hiccuped and cried again. The woman kept her head bent, a tremor in her shoulders. Cassian stood and stepped out of the shade. The first rule of getting in the way of a machine is to force it to see you as a person. Machines are built to grind what is beneath them, not to negotiate with it. Morning, he said, and his voice carried easy. Bad day for business. 7 heads snapped toward him. Someone swore. The leader did not move his hand from the girl's chin, but his eyes narrowed the way. A man's eyes narrow when a new math problem opens under his feet. Keep walking, the leader said. You're not part of this. I'm part of whatever I decide I'm part of, Cassian said. He kept his hands away from his weapons. He let them hang easy at his sides, palms forward. Let the caravan go. You want to buy them? The leader asked, mildly curious, as if this was interesting, as if everything could be solved by the same form of exchange. I'm not buying anyone, Cassian said. I'm telling you to leave. Laughter. It broke sharp and short. The kind you hear in a bar right before chairs are swung. Who are you? The leader asked. A man with a pouch and a pistol. Do you know what we are? You're kestrel, Cassian said, the way a biologist might say mammal. You work contracts. You know how to calculate risk. Do you? The leader asked. Cassian lifted a hand and pointed to the ridge. Your long gun's above the cedar. He's got a good line to the flat, but not to me. I'm under his angle. You've got 2 in reserve, 1 left, 1 right, and the one on the left is jittery. His fingers hungry. That makes him unpredictable. The leader's mouth flattened at the edges. Cassian watched the twitch pass as the man recalculated. Men like him did not live long by ignoring new data. Even if you are right, the leader said, there are 9 of us. Cassian shrugged. You brought skiffs. That means you care about your skiffs. You care about your cargo. You care about losing men even more, because you have to replace them. Killing me costs you time and profit. Leaving costs you pride. Pride is cheap, profit is not. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the hover engines and the little girl's sobbing hiccups. Then the leader took his hand away from the older girl's chin and looked past Cassian as if he were examining a distant piece of weather only he could see. Who sent you? He asked finally. Cassian smiled without showing teeth. My mother, he said. She liked me to help the neighbors. The leader's face shifted, not anger, not amusement, just that small adjustment a man makes when he is deciding whether to laugh or tell his people to shoot. Narave moved beside Cassian then. She did not step ahead of him, but shoulder to shoulder. Her body said, "We are 3 dimensions, not a single silhouette." She drew the crescent blade and let it catch the light. The curve looked like a new moon, ready to grow. "Those are my children," she said, and it was not a plea or a threat, but a proclamation that carried down into the stone. The leader's gaze touched her, then the blade, then Cassian again. He twitched 2 fingers. The men at the skiffs lifted their rifles a hair. The reserves shifted. The long gun above the cedar settled its scope. Cassian moved before the long gun finished settling. He stepped into the space between breath and bullet and fired twice. Not up at the ridge, but at the left skiff's engine, cowling. The rounds were non-lethal stun slugs he had loaded for a trail. Not a fight, but a skiff's belly doesn't know the difference between a moral choice and a kinetic event. The cowling sparked and coughed. The engine hiccuped, dropped half a meter, and skidded sideways into the second skiff with a groan that sounded almost human. Raiders stumbled and cursed. Dust roared up like a cloak. Nara was already moving. She broke for the girls with her blade low and her profile small. Cassian took 3 long steps and threw his shoulder into the leader, driving him back with simple mass and the kind of force that has nothing to do with anger and everything to do with decision. A shot cracked from the ridge and shattered a chip of rock 2 handspans from his ear. He dropped, rolled, and fired toward the cedar's trunk. Not to hit, but to speak to the long gunner in a language men like that respect. "I see you. You are not invisible. If you shoot again, I will make you the first problem I solve." Below, the older girl had let out a cry that was pure torn relief. "Mama!" The little one's hiccups turned to a name that came out as a small, wet song. Nara lifted both of them, one arm under each, blade arcing up to swat aside a reaching hand. Her lips were pulled back, not in a snarl, but in the expression people wear when they are doing something painful and necessary at the same time. "Back!" Cassian shouted, and the word was for Nara and for the caravanners and for the day itself. Back to the rocks. The leader recovered with the stubborn grace of a man whose life had taught him to bounce. He drove an elbow into Cassian's ribs. Cassian felt something grind and tasted copper. He held on because sometimes holding on is the only tactic left. They went down hard. The leader drew a knife. Cassian caught the wrist and twisted and heard the soft, wet pop of something giving way. The knife clattered. The leader's knee came up. Cassian took it on his thigh and then on bone and felt the starburst pain that puts white around your sight. He grunted and slammed his head forward. Forehead to nose. White turned red and then into a clear field. Shots cracked again, but they were not aimed well. The dust, the shuddering skiffs, the moving bodies had turned the clean geometry of the ambush into a mess. Someone screamed. Someone swore in a language Cassian hadn't heard since a garrison city outside Orion. The long gun above the cedar spat once, twice, but Nara and the girls were within the boulder's curtain now, and the angle was gone. Cassian kept moving in the simplest of lines, up, then back, then towards cover. He did not try to disable or humiliate anyone else. He did not try to win the field. Winning is a story you tell when the exit is blocked. He put 2 more rounds into skiff engines and let the raiders concentrate on their equipment. He grabbed the arm of the woman whose skirt the little one had twisted and yanked her toward the rocks. She stumbled, then ran on her own, hauling another caravan guard with her. By the time he reached the boulders, his breath was a file rasping his lungs. Nara crouched with the 2 girls pressed into her sides like birds in a storm. The older one's face was streaked with dust and tears. The little one had hiccuped herself into silence and now leaned against Nara as if all her bones had agreed to be soft for a while. When she saw Cassian, the older girl tried to stand as if she expected to help hold back the world. Her legs shook. She sat again. "Name?" Cassian asked, because it seemed important to give the older girl the dignity of being spoken to that way. and because it kept his voice away from the sharp edge of adrenaline. "Leo," she said, and scrubbed her nose with the heel of her hand. "I am Leo Vey. This is my sister, Rhea. She is 3. "Hello, Leo," Cassian said. "Hello, Rhea." Rhea peered at him through her lashes. Her voice came out as a whisper rusted by crying. "Kassan?" "Close enough." He turned to Nara. "We need to move." Nara nodded. "There is a cut in the ravine wall, 100 steps that way. It's narrow, but even a tall man can fit if he turns his shoulders. From there, an old water path takes us into the blue scrub. After that, we can vanish." "Can you hold both?" he asked, not because he doubted, but because planning rescued people is part of rescuing them. "For a time," she said, "and then my arms will shake. I'll take Rhea." He held his hands low and open to the little girl. "May I carry you?" Rhea's lower lip trembled. She looked at Nara, then at Leo, then back to Cassian with grave ceremony, as if she were conferring a title. "You don't take me," she said, precise as a treaty. "I don't take you," he agreed. "I carry you until your mother tells me to stop." "Okay," Rhea said, and leaned toward him with the fearless trust that often either dies young or grows into something strong enough to put a hand on the world and turn it. He gathered her up. She weighed almost nothing. Heat rose off her like a small summer. She put her head down on his shoulder and made a sound that might have been a sigh if it weren't so careful. As if even her relief had learned to be quiet. They went up through the cut. Nara led, blade ready, Leo at her hip, and Cassian behind with Rhea's small fists curled in his jacket. The skiffs coughed and settled back into a low hover behind them, and men shouted in a language that tried to sound big enough to reach where they had gone. A shot struck the rock at Cassian's back and puffed grit into his teeth. He kept going. The water path was a scar along the ravine wall where the rains, few but fierce, had once cut a channel. It had long since dried and silted, but its curve promised shade ahead, and shade promised choices. They moved along it until the noise of the skiffs fell behind the rustle of scrub-scratching stone and the hiss of their own breath. When Nara finally signaled to stop, they were in a shallow cave whose lip hung with thin stone curtains. The air smelled of old, damp, and blue leaves. Sun came through in ribbons. Leo sat with her back against her mother's thigh and curled as if she could make herself small enough to fit in the space between Nara's ribs and heart. Cassian eased Rhea down. She wobbled, made a brave face, and then immediately reached up again. "It is allowed to be tired," Nara said, and pulled both girls into the shelter of her arms until they were a single outline. Only then did she look at Cassian the way 2 adults look at each other when the noise falls and the children are counted. "You did not have to step out," she said. "I did," Cassian said. "The part of me that decides those things is stubborn." "Humans," she said, a soft exhale that could have meant many things. Then, "There is blood on your shirt." Cassian looked down. There was. It had seeped from a cut along his ribs where the leader's knife had not missed entirely. He pressed a palm to it. The blood came away bright. Nara set the girls so that they were in her lap, touching her, but so she could reach her satchel. Her hands were quick and sure. Her fingers did not fumble. She washed the cut with something that smelled of crushed mint and iron, then laid a strip of woven fiber soaked in sap along it. Coolness spread. The pain's hiss dropped to a civilized murmur. "Thank you," he said. She nodded, eyes scanning his face. Up close, he could see the faint barbed lines along her cheekbones were not paint, but a kind of scar that belonged to her people. He thought of the way the leader had touched Leo's chin and felt anger rise again. Not hot this time, but deep, the sort that lays down roots. "They will not stop," Nara said. "Not today, maybe, but not because they decide kindness. Kestrel does not leave the taste of failure in its mouth. It will swallow it and come for the rest." "Then we make them choose something worse," Cassian said. Her mouth quirked despite the fear. "Is it a human habit?" To talk about the day like it is a dog? It bites and it drools and it wants your food, he said. It fits. Cassian, Leo said suddenly, very serious. Will they take Rhea? No, he said. And it was not bravado. It was a promise he made to himself as much as to Leo. They won't. You cannot know that, Nara said quietly. I know what I can try to do, he said, and what I will not allow. Humans, she said again. But this time, it was softer. They rested until Rhea's breathing smoothed, and Leo's shaking went from sharp tremors to the small shudders that come after too many sobs. Outside, the light shifted on the stone curtains, turning the cave's edges a deeper gold. In the distance came the faint, frustrated roar of a skiff being coaxed into obedience. We cannot go back to the trade track, Nara said. They will watch it. The blue scrub hides paths only we use. We can take one that leads to the river's old bed. From there, to the hollow, where our clan waits. If they have scattered— If they haven't? Cassian asked. Then the hollow will be full of dust and shoes, she said, and the corners of her mouth tightened. Let me come with you, he said. Nara's eyes rose to his face with abrupt honesty. Why? Because I stepped out, he said, surprised to hear how simple the answer was. Because stepping out is a promise. Because your daughters looked at me like the day might not eat us all. He swallowed. His throat felt suddenly dry. And because I am good at being in the way of machines. I thought humans were trouble, she said, and it would have been a tease in a different place with a different sky. We are, he said. The good kind. She looked at her girls, then at Cassian, then at the narrow ribbon of sun outside the stone curtains. Finally, she nodded once, a decision signing itself. Come with us, Cassian Holt, she said. If you break your promise, the scrub will take you and turn you into a thorn. That seems fair. They moved again when the shadows had tilted enough to make the ravine wall laid with long stripes of shade, the sort of light predators dislike. Nara showed Cassian how to step where the ground held and not where it would crumble. Cassian showed Nara the trick of counting time by breath when you are moving faster than your body wants to move, so panic doesn't set the pace. Rhea drowsed on his shoulder, waking now and then to murmur nonsense wisdom. Leo walked with her chin up and her jaw set, the way children walk when they want to be seen as older than they are, and also, secretly, still want to be carried. By the time they reached the old riverbed, their feet were powdered with blue dust, and the sky had shifted toward copper. The bed was a wide, pale ribbon scattered with the ghost bones of plants that had evolved to drink mist and memory. Nara led them along a branch that bent toward a stand of trees that had braided their roots into a low wall. Behind it, the ground fell away into a hollow, shaped like a cupped hand. They paused at the lip. The hollow lay quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after shouting no voices, no skiff hum, only the small, determined sounds of a world minding itself. A scattering of packs lay among the rocks. A dropped blanket, patterned in the way Nara's people wove stars into cloth, lay half caught on a thorn. The ashes of a fire held heat. Nara's breath hitched. She set Rhea down and went forward. Leo started to follow, then hesitated and looked up at Cassian, as if asking permission to be a child who needs someone who is not her mother. Go with her, he said, and Leo ran. There were tracks, a dozen, more the hurried souls of people who had left in a rush but not in a rout. Nara touched the blanket, then the ash, then the scuffed dirt, her fingers reading the ground as if it were a letter. She stood, shoulders squaring, and turned. They scattered as we teach, she said. In threes and fours. They took the elders and the sick on sleds. They left signs for those of us who were cut away. She knelt and showed Cassian a small twist of grass bound with a strip of cloth and pinned under a stone. This says, go north to the ridge of Sleeping Teeth. Wait for the star with one blue eye. We will come. Sleeping Teeth? She pointed. The ridge beyond the hollow rose in a line of jagged humps like a jaw laid sidewise. One peak had a white outcrop near its blunt tip. In the falling light, it did look like a mouth yawning asleep. We can make it by full dark if we don't stop, Nara said. We will not make it if we do. Then we don't, Cassian said. They moved again, a line of 4 silhouettes against stone and sky. A human with a sleeping child on his back, an alien mother with a blade that caught the evening star's first spark, and a girl whose small, fierce body was learning the shape of courage on the march. Behind them, the sound of a single skiff rose and fell and rose again. Kestrel would come back to the hollow and puzzle at the missing pieces. They would trace tracks and argue over angles and chase the day into night. Maybe they would find another caravan and decide the ledger could be balanced elsewhere. Maybe not. Machines do not like to let go of a part they think belongs to them. At the base of the sleeping teeth, when the sky had gone from copper to ink, Rhea woke and patted Cassian's cheek with the solemn care of a healer twice her size. You didn't take me, she said, as if confirming a hypothesis. No, Cassian said. I carried you. Good, she said, and put her head down again. Nara's voice came from beside him, low in the dark. If you are trouble, Cassian Holt, you are the kind that lets a mother breathe. He did not answer for a long while. The stars came out one by one and then all at once, and the ridge showed its profile against that cold fire. Somewhere, a night insect began its simple litany. He adjusted Rhea on his back and felt the tiny, steady pulse at her throat. I'll take that, he said at last. I'll be that kind. They climbed the last slope to the ridge and found the shelf Nara had promised. It was barely wide enough for all of them to tuck in out of the wind, but it was enough. Leo curled against her mother. Rhea was already heavy with sleep. Cassian sat with his back to the stone, his pistol across his knees, and watched the horizon for the star with one blue eye. When it rose, pale and single, and not quite true to any chart he had learned on Earth, Nara touched his shoulder and nodded, and in that gesture 12 unspoken agreements passed between them, that tomorrow would demand more than today, that machines belonged to those who stood inside their path and refused to move, that strangers could be one another's rope on a bright, thin day. Far below, a skiff prowled the ravine like a dog that had lost a scent and could not admit it. Far above, the blue-eyed star watched the sleeping teeth and the people in their shadow, and the night folded around them as if it could keep them whole. The blue-eyed star climbed until it hung at the lip of the ridge like a pearl caught in a tooth. The cold that came with it was the kind that doesn't shout but settles, layer on layer, until your bones remember winter. Cassian drew his jacket tighter and let the chill help him stay awake. Beside him, Nara breathed slow and deep, her arm draped protectively over both girls. Leo's hand, still dirty with dust from the riverbed, lay open on her mother's wrist as if she were guarding the guard. Rhea's mouth made little shapes in sleep, small secrets traded with the dark. He had stood a lot of watches in a lot of places, but he could not remember another that made him feel so precisely responsible. In garrison you watch because you have to, on a convoy because everyone takes turns, on a job because if you don't, pay gets complicated. Tonight he watched because 2 small pulses beat against one woman's ribs and he had said the word no like a wall, and now he had to be the bricks. The star winked, a slow pulse, and Cassian almost told himself it was a trick of tired eyes until Nara's head turned on the stone, and she said, without opening her eyes, "Do you hear it?" "Hear what?" He made his voice a whisper that wouldn't travel. "The nickel bells." She pushed up onto an elbow. Her face in starlight was all edges and old softness. "They string them on spider line so the wind can carry them without weight. Only our people make that sound." He held his breath and there it was. Not a chime like metal on metal, but a faint sweet tick like a drop of water falling into a shallow bowl, spaced irregularly so it couldn't be mistaken for an engine or a drone. It came from the slope to their left, just below where the ridge curved into a shadowed pocket. Nara touched Leo's shoulder, then Rhea's hair. The older girl came instantly alert. The younger made a complaint that might have been the word for warm. Nara soothed her with a fingertip and rose into a crouch. "Stay behind me," she told the girls. To Cassian, "If it is not ours, I will be sad because I am wrong and dead, but it is ours." He followed her along the shelf, keeping his weight low. Leo moved in that careful way. Children learn when the world has shaken them hard, and they decide to keep their own balance forever after. Rhea, too sleepy to walk but too stubborn to be carried without permission, shuffled with a hand hooked into Cassian's pocket. The pocket dropped into a bowl formed by 3 leaning boulders. At its center stood a boy of maybe 12 by human years, his legs braced. A thin line of spider silk stretched between his hands, with 6 tiny bells knotted into it. He stopped and held very still when Nara appeared. Then his shoulders dropped all at once, with relief so naked it hurt to see. "Aunt," he breathed. "You came." "Keo," Nara said, and the way she said his name turned the night into a house. She reached for him and then didn't, because the bells would ring. He let the line slacken and slid the loop over his wrist. Leo made a small sound that was both greeting and complaint. She and Keo touched foreheads and then thumped shoulders as if they were trying to be gentle and couldn't remember how. Rhea swayed on her feet and said, "Keo," as if that were a kind of fruit. "This is Cassian Holt," Nara said, and the boy's gaze flicked to the human with a speed that told Cassian he had already catalogued his presence and was deciding what to think about it. He stepped out. "He is with us." "With us how long?" Keo asked, because children are the only ones honest enough to place a clock inside a welcome. "As long as it takes," Cassian said. Keo weighed that and nodded in the courtly way of someone who has learned early that few things are certain, but courtesy costs nothing. "Then thank you," he said. "Elder Surette sent me. The clan split by the old rules. We have 61 souls in the fernglass fold and 9 sleds, 2 with broken runners. Elder says wait for the blue-eyed star, then take the east lip, not the west, because Kestrel put eyes on the west." "Eyes?" Cassian kept his tone neutral. "Flying bugs," Keo said. He waggled a hand by his ear. "The kind that hum only when you're not listening." "Drones," Cassian said. Keo squinted at the word, tested it on his tongue, and apparently found it ugly. "We blind too with cloud ash. They taste dust and forget to see." "We have jars," Nara said, a thread of pride in it. "My mother taught me the mix when I was small. We take certain ash and whisper it under our breath until it listens." "Under your breath," Cassian said. "It hears frequency," Nara said. "You hear magic. We both end in dust on the machine's eye." Rhea tugged his pocket until he looked down. "Up? May I carry you?" "You carry," she agreed graciously, and he scooped her against his chest. She tucked her head under his jaw as if she had been born for that exact spot. They followed Keo along the east lip. The way was cunning, a narrow track that refused to be a straight line, threaded through scrub that scratched at knees and smelled of pepper and cold. Twice Keo stopped and touched a stone, and once he stooped to lift what Cassian took for a weed and revealed a braided strip of cloth buried under it, which he then reburied in another place. The cloth had a pattern woven into it. Cassian had already started to recognize arcs like crescent moons nested in one another. "Waymarks," Nara murmured. "If your enemy learns your script, you learn a new language." "You do that often?" Cassian asked. "Often enough to become tiresome," she said, and the smile that went with it was small and unwilling, but it was there, and he took it like a rationed sweetness. The fernglass fold was not glass and it was not fern, but it caught the thought of both. Wind had carved narrow fins into the rock, and plants with frilled edges had grown between them, softening stone with throat-sound greenness. The fold bent back out of sight from the main slope so that you could stand at the mouth and swear it ended there and be wrong. It did not end. It opened into a hollow crowded with people and quiet. When Cassian stepped in behind Nara, the quiet deepened by 1 fraction because a human stepped into it, but it did not break. Faces lifted. Many had the translucent eyes. Some had eyes a shade darker, green going to smoke. Several elders had set their backs against the rock in the way of people who are more tired than they will admit. A woman with hair braided down to her belt held a baby to her chest and did not rock. The baby slept hard as if sleep were a branch he had climbed and was clinging to with all four limbs. Men and women wore blades, yes, and slung tools with equal readiness. Cassian counted without making it look like counting. He saw fear, yes, and relief, and the sharp, protective pride that does not need permission. An old woman stood from a stone by a low fire. She had lines at the corners of her mouth that said she had swallowed too much grief and refused to let it spoil her tongue. She was small, and the way people leaned around her made her large. "Narave," she said. "You were split." "I came," Nara said. Her voice did that quiet thing again that made Cassian's scalp tighten. "Elder Seret, my daughters Leo and Rhea, they stood when I could not. And this," she did not look at Cassian as if she feared to see how the clan would receive him, and he respected that. "This is Cassian Holt. Long Walk human." He stepped out. "What did he step out of?" someone asked from the edge of the crowd. "Not unkind, not kind, simply wanting to know which story to put in which basket." "A path," Nara said. "A crosshairs. A life that would be smaller if he chose not to." The old woman Seret studied him. Cassian let himself be studied. He knew better than to fill quiet with protestations. His hands stayed where they were, one arm around Rhea, the other open. He did not reach for his identification stamp. Most Verge clans had no use for earth metal credentials. And some rightly took offense. "What do you want, Cassian Holt?" Seret asked, finally. "To keep the children Kestrel wants from being taken," he said. "To make them remember this ridge as a place where they lost profit." "Profit," Seret said, as if tasting something she hadn't chosen to eat. "You think in that? Good. I can use it. Murmurs. Not agreement, not dissent. Recognition. Even among people who carved bells out of nickel and taught ash to sing, there was a ledger. You can't carry a clan through a winter on wishes." Seret made a small gesture, and the space around the fire expanded to include them. "Sit," she said. "Eat. While we eat, tell us what you see when you look at Kestrel." Cassian sat with Rhea in his lap, until Rhea decided food was more interesting than being carried and slid away to sit between Leo and Keo, who had already acquired a stick and was using it to make a point about where not to put your fingers in the soup. A woman with hair silver as a comet put a bowl in Cassian's hands. It tasted of root and meat and spice that remembered warmth. He ate with focus and then put the bowl aside. "They calculated the ground," he said. "They placed a long gun on the high angle and blockers on the flanks. They parked their skiffs to make a wall. The leader does his math out loud with his eyes." "You broke his wall," Keo said with enormous satisfaction. "I nudged it until it fell," Cassian said. "If we make them choose between people and equipment, they will choose equipment unless they stand to lose their contract. We need to make the contract harder to fulfill than abandoning it." "Speak like a map," Seret said. "Not like a prayer." "Where will they go now?" "Back to the trade track to look for easy weight," Cassian said. "Then back to the hollow where you were, to chew it and see if any meat is left under the teeth. After that, they'll fan along the riverbed's branches. If they find a path like this, you'll hear dogs at your door. We've moved before." A thin man with a hand splinted to his chest said, "We can move again." "And again," someone else said. "And again. The children will grow up learning how to put on shoes faster than to sing the names of the stars." "That is a song too," Seret said, but her gaze didn't leave Cassian. "You have places where your people don't go," Cassian said. Heads turned. He went on, because he had learned in other camps that sometimes respect looks like saying a thing plainly, not because they're ghosts or gods, but because the land itself is bad. Mines, old war ground, metal in the rock that scrambles compasses and makes birds forget their nests. "The Ironback," a woman said. "A ridge that sings and gives headaches. And a swamp of old water," another put in. "It eats feet. Machines hate those places more than people," Cassian said. "They can be made to hate them more if we dress them in the right clothes." "Clothes," Keo said with interest. "Signals," Cassian said. "Heat, noise, light. Some you can borrow from the land. Some we can make. If we lead Kestrel through strips of ironback and lay heat on the wrong side of the strip, their skiffs will chase ghosts, and their scopes will wobble. If we make them land, we can be wind under their feet. Trap, Leo said quietly, and the edge in her voice was not bloodthirst, but knowledge that you can only run so long before your legs betray you. Trap, Sarat agreed. Then, Narave, your girls, how do their feet hold? They hold, Nara said, and told the truth without pride or apology. Rhea can be carried by others than me without breaking. Leo has bones like a spring. Leo sat straighter at that, and Cassian saw the quick flick of her eyes toward Keo's siblings and cousins, measuring their bravery the way children do. Not to score points, but to fix their courage to one another like buttons you can fasten with one hand. We will do both, Sarat said. Move and spit. We will send the elders and the very little ones along the fern glass, then the chalk line, then the cold hollow. They will go without fire or song. We will send 3 sleds with them. Nara, you will lead that line. Nara's mouth opened and then shut. Cassian watched the argument she did not let out. My girls have had enough of being uprooted pass across her face and disappear. She bowed her head. Yes, elder. Cassian Holt, Sarat said, and her voice turned flint. If you are trouble worth the breath, you will take the ones who remain and make the iron back cough up Kestrel. Take Keo, because he knows how to throw a stone so it sounds like rain. Take Leo, if her mother agrees. She will not, Nara said, startling a low laugh from a few throats. But she looked at Leo, really looked, and what she saw there was not the story of a child who must be protected from every edge, but the story of a girl who had already found out the world has teeth and had decided to grow her own. Leo Vey, she said, switching, as parents do, from name to question without moving her mouth much at all. Can you listen when you want to jump? Can you be still when your blood shouts? Leo considered in a way that made Cassian want to kiss her forehead for being serious. I can be still and shout on the inside, she said. Aunt Sarat taught me about inside voices. Then you may go, Nara said. Her hand trembled once on her knee, and then it was steady. You may go because you will come back, and because your going will make back easier. Sarat nodded. We move at first gray. We sleep now. We sharpen. We show the children that our fear puts its head down on the blanket when we tell it to. People dispersed. Someone tied a rope between 2 rocks waist high and hung blankets along it to make a crooked wall where mothers could nurse without being watched. Men and women took turns at the edge of the fold, listening to the wind for the wrong sound. Rhea fell asleep in the middle of a piece of bread. Leo did not sleep at once but sat with her chin on her knees, watching Cassian wrap strips of fiber around small flat stones. What will they do? She asked eventually, pointing to the stones. Lie, he said. I heat them, and they tell a machine a story about a person standing where no person is. Like this? Keo slid in with an empty stew bowl, shoulders to shoulders with Leo, now that watchfulness had given way to the kind of tired that makes you look for other warm bodies. Like that. Cassian scooped a handful of ash from the edge of the fire and sprinkled it over his palm, then held it near Leo's ear. He made a low hum in his throat, and the ash spun in a narrow column like a toy tornado. Magic, she breathed. Frequency, he said. Both, Nara said from behind him. She knelt and laid a palm along his ribs, where the bandage soaked with sap was tied. Does it pull? Sometimes, he said. That's not a medical term. Pain has its own dictionary. She checked the edge of the bandage, satisfied herself, and then did something unexpected and simple. She rested her forehead against his shoulder for the length of one long breath. He did not move. It was not a request. It was an exchange of heat. Sleep, she said, drawing back. You will need the kind of eyes tomorrow that don't blink at the wrong second. He did lie down. Sleep took him hard and oddly gentle, like being carried by someone large who knew the path. He dreamed of water running in thin ribbons between stones and of a machine with a dog's head that kept trying to jump the river and falling in because it believed a reflection was the real stream. They went at gray. Cassian woke before anyone touched him. Old habit. The sky was a smear between colors, and mouths made little puffs of cloud when people spoke. Saret broke their lines into 2 rivers and put him in charge of the one that flowed toward Ironback. Nara kissed Leo's temple, then Rhea's round cheek, then pressed her forehead to Cassian's shoulder again, with no warning, as if it had become a thing you did without making a shrine of it. "Bring my daughter back," she said. "I will bring all our daughters back," he said, because he had learned in other places that if you are going to say a brave thing, say it like you mean it, and then bend your body around it so it cannot fall out of your hands. The Ironback ridge rose like the spine of some ancient animal under the skin of the world. He could feel the metal in it before the compass in his wrist chirped. His teeth sang a tiny, irritated song. Leo made a face and rubbed her jaw. "It tastes like pennies," she announced. "That means it's working," Keo said. He carried a sling and a pouch of smooth stones, and he looked like trouble that had discovered a purpose and calmed down into it. They set the first lies at the brush edge, flat stones wrapped with fiber that would take heat and give it back slow. Cassian popped capsules that drank the fire's warmth and then nested them under the stones, so they would bleed that warmth in a pattern that resembled a person's stride. He dusted each with a pinch of Nara's ash and hummed until the powder lay in an even sheet. Leo watched his hands, memorizing. "You'll be able to do this better than me when you're 12, he said. "I will be taller," she said solemnly, as if that were part of the recipe. "Height is useful," he conceded. They moved up the ridge in short runs, laying lies and stitching together a path that would draw a skiff like a moth to a hot window. Keo ranged left and right, listening with the long bones of his legs, coming back with pieces of news. A broken branch that wasn't the wind, a smear in dust that looked like a boot, the scent of oil, where no plant grew. Mid-morning, Keo lifted a fist, and they went down behind a rock as if pulled by a string. A skiff whined somewhere to the west. Cassian peeked and saw it slip along the far side of a low hill, patient and nasty. It threw a pale light across the ground, a targeting wash. He pressed a finger to his lips. Leo nodded, eyes huge but steady. Keo's grin went small and feral. The skiff continued on, intent on some other scent, and the 3 of them breathed out together like that, too, was a signal. By noon, their lies had threaded the ridge into a geometry of bad choices. Cassian set the last one in a pocket of rock where the iron sang loudest. He planted a tiny black bead the size of a fingernail clipping beside it and touched its arm. It blinked once and went to sleep. "What's that?" Leo asked. "An ear that explodes," he said. "If they try to pick up the stone, it will shout at them first and then bite their fingers." "That seems fair," Keo said. They fell back to the second line and waited. Waiting is an art that separates children from soldiers and keeps both human. Leo did not fidget. She sat with her back against the rock and watched a beetle fight its way across a seam in the stone and did not touch it in case its small battle mattered. Keo carved a bird out of a stick with quick, neat strokes and did not look at it once it had wings, as if to say to the world, "I can make this and also let it fly away without putting my name on its belly." Cassian drank, checked his pistol, and tried not to imagine the shape of Nara's mouth if he failed. The skiff came at first shade, its engines throttled low to make its hum less obvious, which had the side effect of making its balance touchier than it should have been. It slid along the ridge's false footpath, and when its light washed over the first hot stone, it paused, uncertain, like a dog scenting a rabbit. Then it moved forward because machines that belong to men who think in profit hate not knowing even more than they hate being wrong. It hit the second lie and adjusted. It hit the third and drifted, correcting. The pilot, a dot behind the glass, leaned, annoyed. The skiff came to the pocket with the sleeping ear and hovered there, thinking hard the way a machine thinks. The dot inside leaned again, and a hand reached down out of sight. There was a click, a long half-breath of silence, and then the bead screamed. It didn't scream loud. It screamed high. The skiff bucked as if slapped. The hand jerked back. The machine tried to correct and met the concentrated sulk of iron with its main down. The hover cushion failed in a stutter. The skiff kissed rock. It wasn't much. You could almost call it a nudge. But the ridge offered no softness. Metal scraped stone, and the skiff's belly sparked. Something unhappy happened under its cowling. It dropped the last half-meter like pride falling off a roof and landed with an audible whump that made Keo throw his fist in the air and Leo whisper, "Yes," without moving her lips. The pilot swore in a voice that the ridge brought to them in pieces. Cassian couldn't make out the words, but he knew the tune, a man whose surety had been eaten by the day. The skiff rocked. A second figure appeared holding a tool that wanted to be a wrench and a weapon and wasn't doing a great job of either. Cassian waited. Doing nothing is the part of fighting that no one writes songs about. When the second figure bent with both hands under the skiff's belly, Cassian stood and went down the incline with the calm spite of gravity on his side. Leo and Keo fanned to either side like small wolves. The first raider saw him and reached for his weapon. Cassian put a stun round into the skiff's open panel, let its guts drink the charge, and watched both raiders jerk as their ground turned into a mouthful of lightning. He slid the last meters and kicked the nearest one's gun away. The other flopped, tried to stand, failed, and decided instead to be brave lying down. "Good afternoon," Cassian said. "I'm Trouble." The raider blinked at him, head throbbing under a shaved crown. He had the kestrel badge on his shoulder, a bird stylized until it was almost a blade. He licked his lips and found they didn't work well. "You're dead," he said, more in hope than conviction. "Not today," Cassian said. Behind him, Keo had produced a length of spider line and already had the second raider's wrists tied with it. Leo stood with her blade in hand, and her mouth set in the line Nara's mouth made when she would not be moved. Cassian crouched. "What's your route?" he asked. The man clamped his teeth. Cassian didn't punch him. He tilted his head and nodded toward the skiff. "If your cargo lies down for a nap here, your boss will be 3 kinds of angry. You tell me your route. I let you call it in like you had an accident that you fixed. You don't. I break the part you need to fly, and you walk back to your base dragging your partner like a sled." The man did a calculation with his eyes. He was not a leader. He was a man with a job who had not asked to break ethics today, and found he had. "Branches," he said at last. The word chewed. "We left 2 on the track, headed north, 2 along the riverbed. He stopped, weighed something again, lost, and kept going. "We're to sweep to the iron back and then east. Meet the unit with the nets at the chalk line." "How many in nets?" Leo asked. Her voice was low, and it did not wobble. 6, the man said, as if the number hurt his mouth. "Maybe 8. 2 are small." "Where?" Keo said. There was nothing in his voice at all. It was like the air had spoken. "Past the chalk line," the raider said, "where the wind makes little teeth in the dust." Cassian filed it in the part of his head where maps lived. He stood. "You're going to stand up," he said to the raiders. "You're going to walk back toward the west until you clear the ridge. You will not look back. If you do, my friend will put a stone in your ear from 50 strides, and you will not like the sound." Keo grinned a grin that was all white. The raiders believed in it. They walked. Leo watched them go with a look that would one day be a tool, and, if she was careful, not a wound. Cassian put a hand on her shoulder. "We go to the chalk line," he said. "And rescue the ones in nets," she said. "And rescue the ones in nets." He agreed. They moved at a lope, skirting the iron's worst moods. Keo ranging again with his sling and his quiet feet. Leo matching Cassian breath for breath. The chalk line was a shelf of pale stone where the wind ate scrolls into the dust and left patterns like handwriting no one alive could read. The air had a taste to it of old bones and salts. Cassian signaled down, and they belly-crawled the last few yards to the lip. Below, the world opened into a gently sloped basin, dotted with low bushes and 3 skiffs. Nets hung from two of them like gray waterfalls, teasing the ground. Between the skiffs, men moved in efficient lines, setting up a frame that could be collapsed and carried. On the far side, a fourth net bulged where something inside it had the shape of trying not to be a sphere. Leo made a sound like a breath stepping on a stone. "I see them," Cassian whispered. "We will be clever. Clever before brave." "What kind of clever?" Keo asked. "The kind that makes them think they are walking into their own plan," Cassian said. He tapped Keo's sling. "You will crack the air behind the far skiff so that the pilot thinks someone is moving in the scrub. Leo, you will be a ghost on the left, just a flick, then gone. When they swing that way, I will cut the net. And then brave?" Leo asked. "And then very?" he said. Keo went. The first crack of his sling made even Cassian jerk, the noise so sharp it split the day. Leo slid along the lip and showed herself in one smooth, deliberate motion, the flash of a small figure and the gleam of a blade. And then she was stone and shadow again. Voices rose. Men turned. The far skiff pivoted, engine keening. The nearest raider reached for his comm and said a word Cassian had always liked in situations like this. "What?" Cassian slid down the slope with gravity for a friend. He hit the net at the bulge and dragged his blade across it. The fibers were springy and tough. His blade was better. The opening he made was child-sized because sometimes fate needs a shape. Two figures tumbled out onto him, light as secrets, one a boy with hair in his eyes, one a girl with a face too tired for her years. He pushed them behind his legs. "It's all right," he lied in the tone of voice that makes lies true. "Run when I tell you." "Now?" the boy asked, not eager, but ready. "Now," Cassian said, and the two of them ran like answers. Shouts. A shot slapped dust by his ankle. He felt, rather than saw Leo move there, the flick of her blade against a rope. A net spilled and collapsed over two men like a clumsy blanket. Keo's second crack peeled, and a pilot swore and overcorrected straight into the shape of a lie they had laid hours ago. The skiff hopped and smacked down, and its engine went to sulk. Cassian backed up the slope, making himself a target that was hard to hold. He was not trying to win. He was trying to make the shape of escape. A raider came up the incline, fast, too fast for his footing. Cassian met him with a forearm and a pivot, and let momentum do what anger tries to do and fails. Take balance away. The man slid. Cassian did not chase him. He turned, lifted his voice, and gave the only order that mattered. "Now." Children poured out of the half-cut net like birds that had been pretending to be stones. 3, then 4, then 2, who held hands as if that were the only law left in the world. Leo was there, blade flashing, cutting their path free. Keo was there, sling whistling, turning anger into hesitation. Cassian took the last little girl, she could not be more than 4, in his arms, with a promised gentleness, and ran. They did not run back the way they came. Keo dove into a cut in the slope Cassian hadn't noticed, a seam that doubled back under the lip. They slid and bellied through dust that tasted like old teeth. The light narrowed to a strip as thin as a line on a palm. Behind them, men shouted the names of the useless gods you call on when you realize the world has a hole you did not see, and your prey knows its shape better than you do. They crawled out into scrub and air. Cassian counted heads with that trained part of his brain that has no poetry in it, and found he was worshipping its math. 8. All 8. One cried without sound, his mouth open in a silent vowel. One held her doll as if it had been braver than she and deserved to be honored as such. 2 were siblings and moved like one creature with 2 sets of lungs. "Go," he said. "Go to the fern glass. Follow Keo. Follow Leo. Do not stop for voices." "And you?" Leo asked, breathing hard, her face streaked with gray. "I will stop the voices," he said, and turned because a shape moved at the edge where basin became slope, a tall shape with a gun that did not deserve to be that pretty. The man lifted it, and Cassian saw the same calculations he had seen in the leader's eyes on the track. He did not have time to think. He had time for one choice. He stood fully into the man's sight, and calmly, gently, in the broadest voice he owned, he said, "You don't have the angle." It was a bluff, and not a bluff. The man's muscles knew angles better than his mind. He hesitated, and that was enough. A stone cracked the air beside his ear with Keogh's signature. Leo's blade stitched attention into fear. The man flinched, fired wide, swore at himself, and then had to dive because the skiff he hadn't heard coming over his own engine's whine slid in from the left, too eager, and the ridge took its balance away because the ridge did not care for eagerness. It kissed the ground, bit a little, and the day went loud and stupid for a minute, in the way fights do. They were gone through the scrub and into the ironback's shadow long before the stupid ended. Keogh led them through a fold in the rock and along a path that could have been a rumor. Cassian carried the little girl until she said, with dignity, "I can walk." And then he let her, and she did, with a hiccup between each step. By the time they reached the fern glass, the first line of the clan, the elders and infants and mothers with milk, was gone. Nara was not there, and the absence hit him in the ribs with the accuracy of a thrown stone. Sarette was there, standing at the mouth, her face pinched with worry and respect. 8, Cassian said simply. 8. She echoed, and did not pretend that the number fixed anything more than itself. Go. The chalk line will sour soon. They will burn it if they have any sense left. Nara's line will aim for the cold hollow. Meet them there. Leo? He said, and the question was all the ones parents ask with their eyes. I go with you. She said, breathless, fierce, and terribly young. No, Sarette said, and Leo straightened as if a strap had been tightened across her back. You go with the 8. You show them how to put their feet where yours go. For a heartbeat, anger flared across Leo's face, the anger of the useful benched, and then something older put its hand on her shoulder and she nodded. Inside shouting, she told Cassian with grave humor. And he loved her for making that joke in a day full of teeth. He touched her blade with 2 fingers, a blessing he did not have the right to give but gave anyway, and went. The sky leaned toward afternoon. The blue-eyed star had bled into a common daylight. The wind picked up, and with it came the smell of cold spaces where even sound had to hurry. Cassian ran beside Keogh through scrub that snapped at their calves. He tasted iron in the back of his throat and the sweet ghost of whatever Nara had soaked his bandage in. He ran on a promise he had made in a cave that smelled of old damp and blue leaves. The cold hollow opened ahead like the inside of a giant's cupped hand. At its lip, he saw movement figures against the stone, the distinct shape of a woman with a blade low, and 2 girls flanking her like commas in a sentence he wanted to keep reading forever. Nara turned her head as if some string between them had been plucked. Her mouth shaped his name. He had time to think of the strange, ordinary miracle of running toward a person instead of away from a danger, when the sound of another skiff raked the air, closer than it had any right to be, and the hollow filled with a new geometry. Machines do not like to let go of the things they think belong to them. Machines also do not like to be told a story by a ridge. Cassian had told one today. Nara had told another. The day had more words. He put his head down into the last slope, lungs burning, legs arguing, and felt the strange peace that comes when you are in the exact center of the choice you made and know that whatever happens next, you stood where you said you would stand. The skiff's engine cut the air into angles that did not belong in the hollow. Cassian felt the change in pressure on his skin before his ears registered the whine. Nara had already turned her girls toward the rock outcrop she had chosen as a fallback. Keogh had his sling out, 2 stones between his fingers, a grin he wore when fear and opportunity collided. Cassian's body did the arithmetic of distance and cover and took 2 strides left to put a boulder between himself and the skiff's nose. It came low, too low, eager to end something quickly. He saw the nose cone tilt, the targeting wash fanning across the basin in a pale comb, teeth counting where bodies were. He didn't have a charge set here. He dragged a capsule from his belt, bit the waxy seal, and slapped the pellet against the hottest face of the boulder. It began to drink sunlight at once. He rolled to the next stone and did the same. A crude pair of decoys that would warm the air above them just enough to confuse a scope not tuned for wind. "Nara!" he called, and she understood the shape of the shout without needing the words. She tucked Rhea in the niche her eye had measured earlier and set Leo to the right of it, where a child with a blade could be brave and not be a fool. Then she ran. Not away, never away, but along the inside edge of the hollow. A tangent that would make a skiff pilot choose between staying on his path or circling to follow a single figure who refused to be a target and insisted on being a question. The skiff's light combed. It caught one of Cassian's quick and dirty decoys and hesitated, a subtle stutter in the wash, a fractional change in tone. He used the sliver of uncertainty like a pry bar. He stood, fired twice into the gravel, near the skiff's fore-engine, not to damage. This time, but to make dust jump in a way that read as movement. The pilot pivoted toward the wrong shimmer. Keo's sling cracked. A flat pop of elastic violence and a pebble the size of a thumbprint kissed the skiff's canopy where it meets the housing. A hairline star bloomed and vanished. It was nothing. It was everything. Cassian felt the pilot's attention split. Then something happened that should not have. A second skiff nose peeked over the lip of the hollow from the far side. Quiet, a snake between stones. Cassian's spine went cold. They had not counted on two. The new arrival's profile was different, sleeker, newer, the kind you buy to impress a contract holder. Cassian had seen their type in other skies, fat with confidence. It hung on the wind and did not rush because it believed in its own precision. Nara saw it too. She cut across the hollow and slid into the shadow of a low ridge. Her eyes flicked once to Cassian, and for a heartbeat he read years of practiced trust in the tiny movement. He didn't know what he had done to deserve it. He didn't have time to doubt it. He let it pull the next choice into place. "Right-hand skiff is vain," he said to Keo, low and quick. "Make it miss on purpose." Keo did not ask how you make a machine proud. He understood. You offer it an almost, and watch it lean into its own story. He moved along the rim, almost showing himself, and then not. A boy the size of a lean promise. The new skiff tracked him, the wash tightening, the engine tuning up a pitch like a singer finding a higher note. Cassian made for the niche where Rhea hid, and caught a flash of big, solemn eyes peering out. He put a hand flat to the rock near her cheek. "Stay small," he said, and she made herself the size of a breath. He took the next 4 meters in a scramble. Felt a shot take a pedal out of the rock at shoulder height, and another chew dirt by his ankle. The first skiff, distracted by the heat ghosts, had overflown its best angle and was trying to roll its nose back into play. It had to climb a fraction to do it. He used the angle to move, body low, lungs burning, the edge of everything sharp as a shaved blade. Nara burst from shadow to shadow, drawing fire off the niches. Twice she raised her blade, and once she threw it and called it back with a quick whip of the wrap tied to its hilt. A motion so clean, Cassian's heart tripped. She wasn't trying to hit anyone. She was breaking lines of attention, turning human reflex into cover the way a matador turns a bull's weight into empty air. The new skiff shifted in irritation. It wanted Keo and could not quite have him. Cassian listened to his own training with the part of his mind that does not care whether you are afraid. Vain pilots trust their machines. Trusted machines choose speed. Speed meets rock with the same outcome every time if you set the slope just right. He sprinted for the outcrop that formed the hollow's eastern lip. Keo's sling cracked again left, then right like someone snapping fingers at a distracted god. The vain skiff came down a hand's width to squeeze a tighter line, nosing into the bowl. Cassian saw its belly pass over a long, shallow fin of stone. He had just enough time to be sorry for physics before physics did what physics does. The hoverfield licked the fin, fluttered, grabbed, and for one foolish heartbeat, the skiff forgot that the earth does not care about pride. It dipped. Its skirt kissed stone. Metal squealed, a sound like teeth on ice. The pilot yanked back and saved it, but the craft's cushions soured. It bobbed into anger, more motion than control. "Now," Cassian said to no one. He stood into the open and emptied the last of his first magazine into the space just in front of the skiff's intake ports. The rounds were non-lethal, but non-lethal rounds still make air hot and dirty. The skiff stuttered, coughed, and ballooned backward. It scraped the fin again. Sparks lifted like a child's idea of stars. The pilot swore in a clipped, competent voice that would do terrible things for money and hated the idea of a human making him look clumsy. The first skiff saw an opening and surged. Its pilot had gotten over his confusion. The wash swung across the hollow toward the niche. Cassian's body moved before his mind did. He dove, shoulder first, into the light, and threw a flat stone he had warmed with his hand straight at the wash's center. It wasn't the stone that mattered. It was the slap of a warm object through a cold measure. The wash hiccuped. The skiff, already committed to a vector, overshot. Its belly cleared the niche by a meter. Rhea made a sound like a held breath, finally allowed to finish itself. Leo's knuckles were white on her blade's wrapped hilt. Nara's voice cut the air. Left! Left! Keo had already gone left, because whatever gods watch boys with slings had decided he should skip a few steps and arrive at his instincts early. He popped a stone high, not to hit, but to show. The first skiff took it like a dare and climbed straight into the wind coming over the lip. It stalled. Not a real stall. Hoverfields don't stall like wings, but enough of a stumble that for 3 heartbeats everything held its breath. Those heartbeats were Leo's. She was out of the niche in a blur, across open ground that didn't want to offer itself, up a shallowing slope with her feet doing math no one had taught them. She reached a bustle of canvas at the base of the nearest skiff, the net rig they hadn't had time to raise, and dragged the whole thing like a fishwife. Teeth clenched, muscles shuddering. Cassian understood a fraction too late, and felt both pride and fear come up hating each other. She flung the bundle under the skiff's belly. The drag lines caught on a stanchion. The skiff tried to pivot and met itself. It reared, pitched, and set down hard on its own dangling gear, with all the grace of a drunk trying to remember how knees work. Down, Cassian said, and she was flat as a lizard against the rock, the wash passing over her like cold rain. The new skiff was done being insulted. It steadied, found Keo again, and a porthole in its belly snapped open with an ugly, efficient hiss. Something winked in the pilot's hand and dropped. Cassian didn't think. He felt the weight of the day rearrange and shouted, "Cloud!" Keo had a jar in his belt because children learn quickly when they must. He smashed it in the air with his sling's loaded pouch, and the mix Nara's people whispered to came alive. A gray bloom fanned out, soft and strange, and the drone grenade fell into it. The ash listened to the noise the weapon made and decided the world should be quieter. The grenade's tumble went clumsy. It hit a rock and bounced in a way rocks had been planning for since before machines learned to hover. It went off target, a cough instead of a bite, and the skiff's arrogant balance lost another friend. Cassian had his second pistol out now, his first bang empty at his hip. He drew a bead on the vain skiff's undercarriage and fired 3 times at a seam where panel met panel. He didn't expect penetration. He wanted sound and heat there. To add a wrong note to a difficult song. The skiff flinched, backed, and in that half-second, Nara was at his side, hair sticking to her temples, blade up, eyes bright with the kind of light people speak about when they say someone has come through something burning. "Move," she said. They moved. Across the hollow, up the opposite lip, into the switchbacks the old water had carved when it was allowed to speak. Shots chased them, wicked, angry hornets that didn't know what to sting first. Rhea was in Nara's arms, and Rhea did not cry because there are times when you do not cry because the day expects you to and you decide to be contrary. They cleared the lip and the world quieted by degrees, as if the sky were laying hands on it. Behind them, men shouted, and one shouted less when the net rig rolled an inch and caught his ankle. Keo laughed once, soundlessly. Leo's grin flashed and went away, because grins are heavy and you put them down when you need both hands. They did not stop until stone turned to broken scrub and the wind found them with a salted, far-traveled smell. Cassian counted again and got the number he wanted. He let himself sit, sudden and graceless, on a stone. Because your legs will take revenge, if you ignore them too long. Nara crouched, set Rhea down, pressed her forehead to Leo's, to Kio's, to his. It was not ceremony. It was inventory. "You were almost a ghost," she said to Leo, voice very calm. "I was a ghost," Leo said, recovering enough to be stubborn, and then, lower, "I did the inside shouting." "You did," Nara said, and glanced at Cassian. The glance said later, "And thank you, and stop me from breaking when no one is looking." "Saret?" Cassian asked. "Cold Hollow," Nara said. "We split there. She sent me with the sleds along the old chalk and took the others toward the mouth with the blue moss. We leave bones where the land has already made a grave. Poetry is a way to lie to fear until it believes you," Cassian said, surprising himself. "Poetry is how we count," Nara said. "Saret will meet us where the riverbed pretends to be a road." Kio sat with his legs out and inspected his sling, as if it were a horse that had carried him bravely and might want sugar. Leo mimed the motion of dragging the net again, then shook her wrists because pain had crept back in now that success had taken its foot off her neck. Rhea put her palm on the ground and whispered something in a language that sounded like wind wearing a necklace. Cassian asked, without asking. "She tells the earth thank you," Nara said. "My mother taught me to make the ground feel important." "It did fine today," Cassian said, and looked back at the hollow's lip. The two skiffs were dots now, angry bees that had lost their flower. "They'll bring more," he said. "Heavier. And men who don't believe they can be embarrassed." "They do not like to fall," Nara agreed, and her mouth tugged. "Machines, or men." He drank. His ribs hurt in a more deliberate way now, as if they had decided to be less dramatic and more thorough. Nara checked the bandage without asking. He did not pretend not to be grateful. Kio muttered something that made Leo raise one eyebrow. Rhea yawned so wide her eyes disappeared for a heartbeat. He felt absurdly like laughing. He didn't. The laugh would come out like a cough with its feelings hurt. "Which way?" he said when breath and sense were friends again. Nara pointed northeast, where the land rose in doubting swells. "There's a cut with teeth. We go through the teeth and let them bite at air." They moved into the teeth. The rocks there had weathered into shapes that made you think of a jawbone thrown down by something bored with chewing. Gaps were just wide enough for a careful body. Cassian went sideways where he had to, his weapon cradled. Kio threaded like a thread. Leo scraped her shoulder once, hissed, did not complain. Rhea reached out and patted each stone as if to name it. Nara's blade occasionally kissed a jut, a promise to cut later if the stone grew too bold. Halfway through, they stopped. Voices came faint and carried kestrel, combing. The skiff's whine was lower, as if the pilots had been told to be humble. Cassian gestured down, and they flattened into the negative spaces the wind had left. The voices passed, the kind of talking men do when they would rather be quiet and are not allowed. When the noise faded, Cassian rolled onto his back and watched a strip of sky. "You could make a life here," he thought, not an easy one, but a real one. If no one tried to take your children and sell them to the kind of places that made your molars creak. He remembered the leader's blank, careful face on the track and felt heat rise under his ribs that had nothing to do with injury. He let it go where it could not burn his judgment. Anger has to be something you aim, not something you wear. They came out of the teeth at a place where the blue scrub gave way to open plain. A line of stones marked a path north waymarks, but older, bleached, almost white. Nara bent and touched one. "Before my mother's mother," she said, "the stones don't match. They were carried from the river. We carried them because the land asked to be remembered." The open made Cassian itch between the shoulders. He saw too much sky and not enough corners. The plain gently cupped to the east, a long, shallow dish. He didn't like dishes unless he could flip them. "We need a lid." "There," Nara said, and pointed to a low rise feathered with some stubborn grass. "A cap of dirt. We can crawl under if we are willing to be dirty." "We have reached that stage," Cassian said. They were not alone under the cap. 2 sleds lay there already, bark-bottomed, draped with netting that had been made to look like the land's own hair. Elder Sarat's profile had always seemed to Cassian made of wind and bone. Under the cap, she looked like a thing the wind had made on purpose. 3 elders lay with their heads on rolled cloaks. 2 mothers nursed. 5 children dozed in that ragged way children do when sleep negotiates with worry. Sarat's eyes opened as if they had never been closed. "You brought your trouble with you," she said. It wasn't a complaint. "Some of it," Cassian said. "We sent some back." "Back to their mothers?" Sarat's mouth tucked. "Profit will make them try again with sharper teeth." "Then we make those teeth expensive," he said. "We will," Sarat said, "and we will teach our children to grow their own, that fit their mouths." Nara slid down beside the sled where Rhea could put her head in her lap and be a weight she wanted. Leo leaned against Cassian's knee like a child who didn't want to admit she wanted a wall to sleep against and chose a human out of convenience. Keo flopped onto his back and stared at the cap's woven underside as if it contained constellations he could name later and impress someone with. "Eat," Sarat said, handing Cassian a flat cake wrapped in leaf. "Then tell me the shape of their hunt." He told it with his hands in the dirt, tracing arcs for skiff sweeps and X's for lies, and a spiral where a grenade had been supposed to be an end and had agreed to be an annoyance instead. Sarat nodded sometimes, and sometimes frowned, and once made a sound like a crow refusing to be impressed. "They will be angry," she said, when he finished. "Angry men make mistakes. Angry contracts make corrections. The next line they send will be cold." "I know cold," Cassian said. "We can make them sweat." Sarat looked at him a long time. "You talk like a soldier who left his uniform behind and kept his habits because they are useful." He did not deny it. "They are useful," he said. "They let me count sleeping children and add." "Good," Sarat said. "We will need adding. We will need subtraction, too." A rustle came along the cap's far edge, and a whisper passed like a hand. 2 scouts slid in, faces dusted, eyes too bright. "The chalk line is sour," one said. "Kestrel tries to burn the taste of us out of it. The fire doesn't want to go. It meanders. It thinks about lying down." "Good," Sarat said. "Let the land be contrary." The other scout held up a token, a twist of cloth with 2 knots. "From the blue moss mouth," she said. 2 sleds safe. 1 turned back with a broken runner. They need hands. Nara was already rising. Sarat's hand lifted a fraction, then fell. "Go," she said, and then to Cassian, without letting Nara hear the plea in it. "Bring her back. Bring him back, too." "Him?" Cassian asked. Sarat's gaze dipped to where Leo slept with the blade still in her palm. "Him," she repeated, and Cassian understood. "Bring back the boy or girl inside the person we will ask to be brave, too young too often." He touched Nara's elbow. "We go together," he said. "We do," she said. "And when we get there, we will laugh. We will have a stupid laugh. My mother said if you do not feed the laugh, the sorrow will get greedy." "I'll bring extra," he said. They slid out from under the cap in 2s. The light outside had taken on that thin quality it has when the sun has decided to make the shadows do most of the work. Cassian felt the day becoming a hallway toward night. If they could get through the hallway without tripping any wires, the dark would be a friend. If they failed, the dark would be a well. They angled toward the blue moss mouth, a cave the color of old oceans. The ground underfoot went from grit to a dusty crust that cracked like thin ice. Keo circled ahead, rolling his feet to keep silence. Twice he froze, hand up, and they followed his stillness like an order handed down in a temple. Once he gestured and Cassian saw the reason. A thin filament strung knee-high between 2 rocks, nearly invisible, leading to a nest of cans and scrap that would make a sound like a village falling down when tripped. "Household alarms," Cassian breathed. "Cheap. Effective." "Ugly noise," Nara said. "We teach babies not to make it. Machines teach men to love it." They went around. The cave mouth rose, soft dripping with the blue moss that gave it its name. The air was cooler there, and wet in a way that made you remember water's insistence. Inside, 2 sleds waited and 3 figures crouched over the third, cursing in 3 languages Cassian knew and one he did not. The runner lay at a queer angle. A woman with grease to her elbows blew hair from her eyes. She looked up, saw Nara, and spat in relief. "Finally," she said. "If I had to be clever alone any longer, I was going to start throwing prayers at it. And you know how that ends. Badly." Nara said, and went to her knees to see. Cassian hovered because the best help sometimes looks like not putting your hands where they don't belong. "Can you brace it?" he asked. "If you give me a knee that doesn't complain," the woman said. "I'm Dennett. Cassian," he said, and put his knee where she pointed and tried not to think about the way bone talked to bone through bruised muscle. They worked. It was not glorious. It was not brave. It was patient, which is a better thing most days. Rhea handed Nara a pin that had been knocked loose and said, "Here." With such satisfaction you might have thought she'd invented the concept of small, useful objects. Leo held the lamp steady, her hand steadying with it. Keo ranged to the mouth and came back once with a look that said the outside had decided to postpone trouble for a handful of breaths. The runner took a new angle. Dannett rapped it, cursed it, kissed it, because you kiss the things you ask to carry your children. They set the sled upright. It skidded and held. Someone exhaled a whole portion of the day's fear. From the mouth came a sound like a man trying not to be a man. A stifled order that made the hair on Cassian's arms stand up for the audacity of the attempt. He reached down without looking and found Leo's shoulder. One squeeze. She nodded. Nara stood, blade low, not for show now, but for work. "Go," Sarat had said. "Bring them back." Cassian looked at Nara and found that steadiness again, the one that made the choices he had already made feel the right shape. "On me," he said softly. "Beside you," Nara corrected. They moved as the day shrugged into evening. Machines do not like to let go. Neither do people who have decided a thing belongs to them. But the land sometimes takes sides, and poems sometimes make maps, and a human with good habits can, with luck and stubbornness, become a wall in a world that has too few. They moved toward the mouth of the cave and the men outside who thought the blue moss would make them invisible, and Cassian felt the odd, clean hum in his veins that wasn't adrenaline anymore but its cousin, purpose. He had stepped out on a track to tell a man pride was cheap and profit was dear, and he had found the place he wanted to spend whatever he had saved. "Ready?" he asked. Nara smiled, a fierce, unornamented line of mouth, sharp as the rim of a cup. "I was born ready," she said, and then, almost laughing in the exact middle of the worst place to do it, "My mother told me that when she wanted me to hurry." "Then let's hurry," he said, and together they stepped into the doorway of the next fight. The cave mouth breathed damp air into their faces, smelling faintly of minerals and old moss. Cassian held his pistol low, not raised yet, but ready in that way soldiers carried weapons when they weren't sure if the next heartbeat would be quiet or full of noise. Nara walked beside him, blade angled downward, every line of her body tuned to listen. Behind them, Keo shifted his sling stone to stone, nervous energy kept in check only by the muscle memory of practice. Leo followed, her jaw set, refusing to be small, while little Rhea clung to Dannett's skirts and whispered to herself as though the ground could still hear her gratitude. The blue moss glowed faintly, painting everything in a soft light that made the shadows deeper, stranger. It should have felt safe. Caves always promised shelter, but Cassian knew better. Caves held echoes, and echoes could betray you just as quickly as a careless step. Then it came, a voice, half muffled from deeper in the dark. Not shouted, not careless, controlled. They're close. Cassian froze. Nara's hand found his forearm, grounding him, then slipped away as her daughter's eyes turned to her. He gave one sharp shake of his head. "Don't speak. Don't breathe loud." The voices were maybe 30 paces in. Kestrel had beaten them here. Or rather, Kestrel had been waiting. The moment stretched. Dust fell in a slow ribbon from the cave ceiling. Cassian adjusted his stance, weighing the options back out and risk being tracked across open ground, or push in and gamble on surprise. Nara leaned closer, her whisper a thread thinner than smoke. If we retreat, they follow the sleds. If we fight here, the stone narrows their numbers. He nodded once. It was the same conclusion. Sometimes the land made the choice for you. Cassian gestured. Keo left flank, Leo with Nara. He'd go center. Danet caught his eye and silently pulled Rhea back against the sled, covering her small ears. The hum in Cassian's blood, the one that wasn't fear but its older cousin, purpose tightened. They moved. Slow, careful steps over rock that wanted to shift. The voices became clearer. 2 men, maybe 3. One cursing about the sled runner, another steady, giving clipped orders. Cassian saw the faint glow of a portable lantern, the harsh white wrong against the blue moss. He waited until they were close enough for the smell of oil on their jackets to reach him. Then he stepped forward, pistol raised, voice calm as stone. Hands where I can see them. The effect was immediate chaos. One raider cursed and spun, his weapon halfway up before Nara's blade flashed and knocked it aside with a ringing spark. Another lunged for the lantern, maybe to smash it and plunge them into darkness, but Keo's sling cracked, and the lantern flew from his hand, skittering harmlessly across the stone floor. The leader, tall and sharp-eyed, froze mid-motion, studying Cassian. His hand hovered near his holster, but didn't touch. His eyes narrowed, and Cassian saw the same calculation he'd seen on the trade track. Risk weighed against profit, hesitation measured in lives. Only this time Cassian's side wasn't outnumbered and desperate. It was angry and sharpened by the day's survival. "Step away from the sled," Cassian said. "Now." The leader's lips twitched. "You think you can keep them? You think one stray soldier and a handful of children can stop Kestrel?" Nara's voice cut through, steel wrapped in quiet. "We already did." She moved faster than Cassian expected, blade rising in a sharp arc. The leader staggered back, weapon finally clearing his holster, but Cassian's shot barked before it leveled. The pistol's report slammed through the cave, deafening in the confined space. The leader's weapon clattered to the stone. He dropped with a curse. Not dead, Cassian hadn't aimed to kill, but out of the fight, clutching a bleeding arm. The other 2 broke. One ran deeper into the cave. The other tried for the mouth. Keo's sling caught the latter, a stone snapping his knee sideways, so he fell, shrieking before Nara's blade hissed at his throat to silence him. The last man's footsteps echoed away, retreating into the dark, where even the moss light couldn't chase him. Cassian exhaled. His ribs ached. The bandage was warm again under his shirt. But the sled was safe. The children wide-eyed but unhurt, and the sound of boots running deeper into the cave meant Kestrel hadn't won this time. Nara crouched, checking her daughters first, then the bound raider moaning on the stone. "They will come again," she said simply. Cassian nodded, reloading with practiced efficiency. "Then we'll be ready." For a moment, their eyes met hers, fierce and tired, his steady, lined by too many old wars. Between them passed an unspoken truth. This wasn't over. Not tonight, not tomorrow. But they had turned the tide in this hollow of blue moss. And maybe, just maybe, they had started to show the land itself that resistance was worth the telling. Outside, the sky had shifted. Dusk's copper was deepening into violet, stars pricking through one by one. The day was folding itself closed, and with night came choices sharper than any blade. Cassian glanced once more into the cave's depths, where shadows pooled like waiting teeth. "We should move, before they circle back." "Yes," Nara said, gathering her daughters. Her hand brushed his arm again, not by accident this time. "We moved together," and they stepped out of the blue-lit cave into the darkening world, where Kestrel still hunted, and where survival meant daring to build something greater than fear. The land was dark and restless when they left the cave behind, the sky littered with stars like spilled fire, the blue-eyed one gleaming brighter than the rest. The air was sharp and metallic, biting at every breath, but they moved anyway. A river of weary bodies carrying with it not only survival but something heavier, the fragile hope of a people hunted. Cassian led the way, eyes never still, ears tuned for the kind of silence that meant machines were near. Nara walked beside him with Rhea perched on her hip, the child's small hands tangled in her mother's braid, while Leo trotted close, her hand on her blade as if the steel could keep the night itself at bay. Keo ranged ahead, sling swinging idly but his body coiled with readiness. Danit muttered under her breath as she guided the stubborn sled, but her curses were sharp enough to hide her fatigue. Every step was deliberate, every sound checked, the weight of survival pressing on them like a second sky. When they reached the rim of the cold hollow, the moon had risen, silvering the jagged rocks until they looked like teeth bared in warning. Cassian crouched and studied the basin below. Something was wrong. Shadows that didn't belong to stone clung too carefully to the ground. Scouts, at least 4. He hissed for Nara's attention, and she crouched beside him, eyes narrowing as she saw the same truth. "They wait," she said. Her tone was low, flat, too calm for comfort. "Seret told us to meet here. If Kestrel lies in the hollow, then they knew." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Not just knew. They're setting a trap." Leo, watching the scouts with a child's clarity, tugged at his sleeve. "They want us to go down," she whispered. "They want us to feel safe first." He looked at her, saw no hesitation, and nodded. "Exactly. That's how they profit. Wait until you exhale, then strike." It was Rhea who broke the silence then, lifting her head from Nara's shoulder, her voice soft but filled with that strange solemnity that sometimes lives in children too young to understand what they carry. "Don't go down," she said. "The ground is angry." For a moment the words stilled even the wind. Cassian felt the hair at his nape rise. Nara's gaze was unreadable, but she pressed her lips to her daughter's hair. "My mother used to say the land speaks through the smallest mouths. Tonight, I believe it." Cassian pointed northeast, where the ridge sloped into broken ground. "We cut around. Harder path, but it won't feed us to them." Danit cursed under her breath at the sled's ruined runner. "If we push it through rocks, it'll break for good." Cassian crouched beside it, running his fingers along the frame. "Then we lighten it. Carry what we can." He unstrapped his own pack, weapons and rations thumping into the dust. Others followed suit. Nara set Rhea down for a moment, but the girl swayed, blinking heavy-lidded. Cassian crouched in front of her. "Rhea," he said softly, "may I carry you again?" She fixed him with the same grave eyes she always did, weighing his words. "You don't take me?" she asked. He shook his head. "Number I carry you, until your mother tells me to stop." After a pause, her lips twitched almost into a smile. "Okay." She lifted her arms, and Cassian gathered her close, the small heartbeat steady against his chest, reminding him again why he had stepped out of hiding. They skirted the hollow, sticking to the broken ridges where shadows could be friends. Twice Cassian froze them with a hand raised, and twice they pressed flat against the earth while Kestrel patrols passed. Skiffs glided low, engines humming like restrained predators, lights combing the ground for silhouettes. Leo pressed herself against Cassian, trembling but silent, her breath shallow. When the danger passed, he squeezed her hand once, a wordless promise. "You did well." She lifted her chin, fierce even through the tears streaking her dusty face. By dawn they reached the far lip of the hollow where the rest of the clan waited. The sleds were hidden beneath netting. Elders crouched low, eyes hollow with fatigue. Elder Seret rose, small and spare, but her presence filled the space. "You found teeth," she said. Cassian nodded grimly. They were waiting. They knew the hollow was the meeting ground. Seret's mouth pressed thin. "We carry too many memories of betrayal." Her gaze shifted to him. "How long?" "Not long," he replied. "Before the sun climbs, they'll sweep again." She nodded once, as if her bones already knew it. "Then we move, before the sun betrays us too." The clan followed the dry riverbed that curled like an old scar across the land. Heat came with mid-morning, baking the stones until the air shimmered. Cassian caught it first, the faint rise of dust against the horizon. Steady, measured, wrong. Not wind, engines. His gut coiled tight. "Kestrel," he said. Nara was at his shoulder instantly. The clan scrambled into the scattered rock spines, sleds dragged into shadow, children hushed by mothers' hands, pressed gently over mouths. Seret lifted her hand, calm despite her years. "Quiet." Cassian crouched on the ridge, pistol in hand, and watched the dust plumes grow into 3 skiffs, moving in a wide sweep. Their formation was perfect, cold, efficient. A hunter's net. He whispered through clenched teeth. "They know. They've been tracking us." Nara's eyes narrowed, fire catching in the violet depths. "Then we give them something else to find." Cassian looked at her, felt the corner of his mouth twitch despite the tension. "That's trouble talking." Her reply came sharp, almost like a vow. "The good kind." They had no choice but to prepare fast, for the day had found them again, and Kestrel was closing in. The rocks burned with the rising sun, turning every edge into a blade and every shadow into a thin veil that could hide death or nothing at all. Cassian's eyes swept the plain as the 3 skiffs widened their formation, their engines whispering with predatory patience. He felt the weight of Rhea's small body against his chest, her head heavy on his shoulder, and the low tremor in Leo's stance beside Nara, her blade already unsheathed. Keo crouched with his sling ready, his mouth pulled tight in concentration. Elder Seret stood among them, calm as stone, though her eyes were sharp, measuring every detail of the sky, the dust, the pace of approaching death. Cassian set Rhea down gently, brushing a hand over her hair, and pressed her toward Nara. "Keep them behind the spines," he murmured. "If Kestrel wants blood, they'll look for me first." Nara's eyes flared. "And if they want children?" Her voice was low, dangerous, all mother and steel. "Then they will find my blade before they touch them," Cassian said, and something in his tone flat. Absolute pulled a flicker of trust across her face despite the storm in her chest. The first skiff broke formation, angling closer, its nose lowering to skim the plain. Dust rose in its wake, a false fog in the morning light. Cassian crouched low, pulling a heat pellet from his pack. He pressed it against a stone, waited for the capsule to hum warm, and slid it across the dirt with the flat of his palm. It rolled into open ground, invisible except to the machines that hunted with sensors instead of eyes. The skiff's wash swept over it, and the nose dipped, pausing, confused. Cassian's hand flicked in signal. Keo rose from his crouch, sling snapping forward. The stone cracked against the canopy with a sharp ring, leaving a white mark that spidered across the glass. The skiff jolted, overcompensating. That was enough. Cassian stood, drew his pistol, and fired twice at the intake vents along its belly. Sparks spit, and the hoverfield shuddered. The skiff veered, clipping the edge of a boulder with a grinding scream before wobbling back into the air. Its pilot cursed loudly enough that even the rocks seemed to taste his anger. The second and third skiffs surged forward in response, their washcombs bright and merciless, cutting across the terrain. The air sang with their engines, the hum in Cassian's bones deepening until it felt like the land itself was vibrating. Nara stepped forward then, blade in her hand, hair streaming like a banner in the hot wind. She raised her weapon high and shouted not a word. Cassian understood, but something raw and commanding that made every child clutch tighter to their mother and every elder straighten against the stone. It wasn't fear she called out, but defiance, a refusal to yield. For a heartbeat, even the skiffs seemed to hesitate, their machines caught in the gap between calculation and the ancient sound of a people who would not bow. Cassian took the pause and turned it into action. He ran, low and fast, toward a narrow gully that split the plain. "Follow me!" he barked, and Keo darted after him, nimble as a shadow. Leo quick on their heels despite Nara's sharp call to stay back. The 3 of them slid into the gully just as the skiff's wash seared the ridge they'd left, blasting rock into powder. Inside the gully, sound warped, the air cooler, tighter, the walls shielding them from the sweeping beams above. Cassian pulled another pellet from his belt and cracked it against the stone. Heat bled into the rock, rising in strange patterns. The skiffs circled overhead, their sensors picking up ghosts, seeing bodies where only stones sweated with false warmth. "They're confused," Cassian said, his chest heaving. But not for long. Keo grinned, teeth flashing white in the dim light. "Then we make them more confused." He loaded another stone into his sling, whispering something under his breath like a blessing, and launched it high. It sailed up through the slit of sky, clattering against the side of a skiff. The machine spun slightly, tilting its wash wide. Leo dashed forward, grabbed another pellet from Cassian's pouch without asking, and pressed it to the wall the way she had seen him do before. It glowed faintly, hidden but loud to the machines. She glanced back at him, her eyes fierce. "Inside, shouting," she whispered. He nodded, pride cutting through his fear. Above, the skiffs snarled, their engines straining as the pilots fought to pin shadows that refused to hold still. Dust boiled where their wash struck empty ground. One dipped too low, chasing the false heat. Its hover field faltered on the uneven terrain, and with a groaning whine, it clipped the ridge and spun, skidding across the dirt in a storm of sparks. Cassian surged from the gully, sprinted up the slope, and fired twice into its belly, crippling it before the pilot could recover. Smoke rose, acrid and bitter. The machine hissed like a wounded beast, spitting sparks into the morning air. The other two skiffs wheeled back, angrier now, their washes sweeping wide arcs across the basin. The clan scattered into crevices, mothers clutching children close, elders shielding the youngest with their frail bodies. Nara stood at the center, blade flashing in the light, shouting words Cassian still didn't understand, but felt like fire hammered into sound. He ran back to her side, chest burning, lungs raw. Their eyes met hers, sharp with fury and desperate love. His steady with the resolve of a man who had stepped out once and would not step back. "They'll keep coming," Nara said through her teeth. "They won't stop until the ledger is balanced." "Then we don't let them write the numbers," Cassian answered, reloading with a snap. "We burn the book." The sky roared again as the skiffs circled for another pass, and the land beneath them braced. Every stone, every breath, every trembling child waiting to see if the day would swallow them whole or if defiance, stitched together with courage and stubbornness, could force the machine to choke. The world became noise and fire. The two remaining skiffs screamed across the basin, their wash tearing the earth open, shredding scrub and stone as if the land itself were nothing but cloth to be unstitched. Dust rose in choking curtains, and in that choking haze the clan clung to one another, scattered in hollows and cracks, their breaths stolen by fear. Cassian stood with his pistol braced against both hands, his ribs a furnace of pain, his blood running damp under his shirt, but his eyes steady. Beside him, Nara moved like a figure carved from fury and grief, her blade flashing arcs of violet steel in the sunlight. Her daughters pressed back behind the shelter of stone, but watching her with wide, unwavering eyes. The first skiff angled too low, hunting the shadows. Cassian didn't think. He aimed, fired, and watched one round spark against its intake. It staggered, its hum choking as its cushion flickered. Nara seized the moment. She sprinted forward into its shadow, her body a streak of light against the haze, and lashed her blade across the vent lines. Sparks spat, the hoverfield collapsed, and the skiff slammed into the ground with a shriek of metal. Its pilot cursed, clawing at controls, but Cassian was already there, hauling him out by the collar, pistol pressed to his temple. "Call him off," he barked, his voice flat and lethal. The man spat blood, defiant, but when Nara's blade touched his throat, he froze. The last skiff swept wide, circling like a hawk, unwilling to dive into the same trap. It hovered higher, its wash combing the ground in calculated sweeps. Cassian knew it now. The pilot was clever, patient. This one wouldn't stumble into stones. This one would bleed them dry with time. He lifted his pistol, but it was useless at that distance. He swore under his breath, then Leo rose. Small, dust-streaked, her blade clutched in trembling hands, but her chin lifted like a warrior's. She ran to her mother's side and shouted, her voice breaking but carrying, "We are not prey." It was no strategy, no tactic, just a child's cry of defiance. Yet it echoed off the rocks, turned fierce by the land itself. The skiff hesitated. Machines didn't care for words, but the man inside did. He swung his wash toward the girl, toward the child who dared stand. Cassian's body moved before thought. He shoved Leo down, stepped into the beam, let it paint his chest in pale fire. He lifted his arms wide, pistol in one hand, the other open. "Come for me!" he shouted, his voice ripping through dust and fear. "You want profit? Take me!" For a heartbeat, the sky seemed to hold its breath. The skiff dropped lower, wash narrowing. Keogh's sling cracked then, stone whistling like a bird of prey. It struck the canopy with a perfect pop. The pilot flinched, his machine veering just enough. Nara hurled her blade with a cry that split stone. It spun end over end, caught the vent grill, and bit deep. The skiff coughed, engines howling, and then gravity claimed it. It pitched sideways, slammed into the earth, and rolled in a howl of breaking metal. Silence followed. Silence so deep it hurt. Dust drifted down in pale sheets. The air stank of oil and scorched rock. Cassian's pistol hung at his side, his shoulders trembling. Nara strode forward, retrieved her blade from the wreckage, and stood tall against the settling haze. Around them, the clan began to rise, children blinking, elders leaning on staffs, mothers clutching their little ones with tears they hadn't dared spill before. Elder Surette approached slowly, her eyes sharp but glistening. She looked at the wreckage, then at Cassian, then at Nara and her daughters. Her voice came quiet, but carrying, stronger than the skiff's engines had ever been. "They thought we would scatter and die, but we held. We bit back." Cassian let out a long breath, every muscle trembling now that the moment had passed. He looked at Nara, at the streak of blood along her cheek, at the fire still burning in her eyes. He looked at Leo, clutching her blade with white-knuckled pride, and at Rhea, clinging to her mother's skirts with solemn calm. He realized then that he hadn't stepped out only once on that first day at the ravine, but again and again, each time choosing to stand with them. And each time, he felt himself bound deeper into their fight, their clan, their survival. Nara sheathed her blade, turned to him, and for the first time since they had met, her voice softened without breaking. "You carry more than my daughters now, Cassian Holt," she said. "You carry us all." He met her gaze, his throat tight, and nodded. "Then I won't put you down." Behind them, the wrecked skiffs burned, the smoke curling into the sky like black banners. Ahead lay more danger, more hunger, more pursuit. Cassian knew Kestrel wouldn't abandon the chase after one defeat. But for this moment, under the bruised morning sky, among people who had chosen defiance over despair, he felt something he hadn't in years, not just survival, but belonging. And belonging was worth fighting an army for. The smoke of the wrecked skiffs rose into the morning sky, twisting black ribbons against the pale blue, a message written in fire that every watcher within miles would understand. The clan did not cheer. They did not weep. They simply gathered themselves from the cracks and shadows, children clinging tighter to their mothers, elders leaning heavier on staffs, every face worn with exhaustion, but etched with a quiet, unyielding pride. They were alive. They had bitten back. For now, that was enough. Cassian stood at the edge of the basin, pistol heavy in his hand, chest aching with every breath. He could still feel the echo of the skiff's wash against his body, the hum of danger that had passed so close it had almost remade him. His ribs throbbed, his bandage warm, but he was steady. Behind him, Nara emerged from the haze, her daughters pressed close to her sides. Leo walked upright, her small blade still clutched in her fist as if she were reluctant to surrender the weight of courage. Rhea clung to her mother's skirt, her eyes solemn and unblinking, watching the sky as if she could already see the next danger waiting there. Elder Surette stepped forward, her figure frail in the dawn light, but her voice clear. "We have walked through the hollow of teeth. she said, speaking for all to hear. And we are not swallowed. She turned her gaze on Cassian then, sharp and searching. You stepped out of the dust, human, and put yourself where our children stood. Why? Cassian met her eyes, the words coming without hesitation. Because I couldn't watch them be taken. Because I've seen machines grind lives into profit, and I swore I'd never let it happen again. And because... He glanced at Nara, at Leo's fierce stare, at Rhea's tiny hands curled into fabric. His voice softened. Because they matter. More than I do. More than I ever thought I would again. For a moment there was only silence. Then Sarat bowed her head, slow and deliberate, a gesture of respect that rippled through the gathered clan. Others lowered their heads too, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Nara's eyes shone, the violet depths unreadable, but her voice was steady. Then you are no longer a stranger among us. You are trouble, Cassian Holt, but you are our trouble now. The words struck him harder than any bullet. He nodded once, the promise sealing itself in his chest. The clan moved quickly after that, knowing Kestrel would send more, heavier, angrier. They gathered the sleds, repaired what could be repaired, lifted the wounded. Cassian took his place not as an outsider but as one of them, carrying loads, steadying elders, watching the horizon with a soldier's eyes. Leo walked at his side, stubbornly refusing to ride, her blade tucked against her belt, as if she had already claimed her place as a defender. Rhea rode in his arms again, her head tucked under his chin, whispering nonsense lullabies to herself that somehow made the weight of the day easier. They followed the dry riverbed north until the land softened into green scrub and distant ridges. The sun burned above, but the wind carried the scent of water, faint but real. Hope. The clan pressed on, step by step, a people who had endured one more storm and found themselves still standing. As dusk fell, they reached a sheltered hollow where the rocks bent inward like cupped hands. Fires were kindled carefully, smoke kept thin, food passed hand to hand in silence. The children finally laughed, small bursts of sound that made the stars feel closer. Cassian sat with Nara at the edge of the firelight, her daughters leaning against her, their eyes heavy with sleep. For the first time since stepping out on that trade track, he let himself breathe without fear. Nara's voice was quiet, meant only for him. You could have kept walking that day. You could have left us to fate. I could have, Cassian admitted. He looked at her, at the lines grief and strength had carved into her face, at the softness that lived there still, waiting. But then I'd have kept walking alone. Her hand brushed his, light as a breath. Not quite a touch, but enough. He didn't move, didn't break it. Around them, the clan slept in fragile peace, the wreckage of their enemies smoldering miles behind, the threat of tomorrow looming just beyond the horizon. Cassian looked at the stars, the blue-eyed one glinting steady above. For the first time in years, he felt not just like a man surviving the day, but like a man building towards something greater. He had stepped out for a child's plea, and found himself bound to a people, to a family, to a promise he would not let break. And though Kestrel would come again, though machines and men would hunt and the land itself might turn against them, Cassian knew the truth now. He would stand, always, where he had once stood on that track, between the innocent and the teeth of the world. He would not let them be taken, not while he still drew breath.